It really wasn't that long ago that this Epipremnum was white hot, and it had a price tag to match. It's been available and affordable for a couple of years, and I have grown this gorgeous example of it. Do I have any regrets? I have a regret. Hey guys, it's Dave, and today we are going to talk about and do a little work on an Epipremnum. I told you all returning viewers that I had more than Hoya. This is proof right here. This beautiful lady has grown into such a wonderful plant. No question about that. But we had a rough start. I will get to that in a moment. I did not succumb to the temptation to buy this when it was going for mid to upper double digits for a cutting here in the United States. Being an Epipremnum, seemed like there was a good chance that it would grow very, very well and people would be doing cuttings and selling them. And it also seemed like with so many influencers talking about it, it would catch on. And that's exactly what it did. Costa Farms put this into mass market production, and baskets started showing up for, I think, 16 for their medium basket, 20 bucks for the big one. That's the only regret I have on this plant, is that I bought one of those $20, what is it, an 8-inch basket. They pack them in pure cocoa coir for shipping. And this one was very, very rooted into it, so it was just a mass of roots, and which would have made it hard to put it into a normal substrate that I am comfortable using. It was winter, and the pot was light as air. Just every possible potential for root rot. So I watered it. The temperature in Iowa dropped to like 20 below. Our furnace can't keep up with that. It got cold. The plant started failing almost immediately. So I had to take cuttings, and this plant is what survived from that. And I've now cut it back several times. I'm going to do that today, which is my preference, is to show plants and then work on them, because we've got this going on right now, and this plant is getting completely thirsty about every 3 days. And as much as I love watering a plant, I don't want to have to water a plant every 3 days. So I will talk to you about this a little bit while we look at it. And before I forget to say this, just because a root pokes out of the bottom of a pot does not mean that it needs a repot. Roots are going to go down and they're going to try to find water. So especially if you keep it in a saucer that might be moist, roots are going to find that moisture. It's a combination of giving us a very, very thorough watering, and to the point now I'm actually soaking it in a bowl so it can absorb as much moisture as possible in the bark it's in, bark mix. So it's time. I'm also seeing telltale signs, a few leaves looking like this. Now, yes, that could be from a grow light. This one's not under a grow light, but if you see it, it could be that. I started to see some little brown tips. Okay, not very many. I tend to take my trusty bonsai scissors and trim those off a little bit as I water. But the main thing is that a thorough watering, 2-3 days later, the pot is extremely light and it's thirsty again. And while I abhor the advice to let a Hoya go limp or worse, wrinkly, before you water it, this will just kind of flatten out a little bit and then pop right back up. So that's not a big deal. I don't want, this is an 8-inch pot, one of those German salt clay pots that I love so much. So I am not going to put this in a larger pot. I just want to make this fuller and fuller. So I'm going to do a root trim. So there's some things to do on this plant that might be a little bit more interesting than to tell you what kind of fertilizer I use. GT Foliage Focus, of course. That's the only thing I use regularly on all my aeroids. And the link in the description. And I forgot the butter knife, so I'll be right back. And we're back. While I'm doing this, I'm just going to go down the edges here really quickly. I feed this weekly. I'm sure you have heard that. So 10 to 12 milliliters per gallon of the foliage focus, which I cannot say enough good things about. I've been using that, if you're new here, for over a year now at this point. And you know, it takes a long time for positive changes to show in a plant. But boy, have I had great growth on everything that I've given that to, everything I've given it to. I give it to everything except the Hoya, and then even occasionally the Hoya. So this mix is, as you can see, very, very loose. Unlike how I bought it and almost killed this plant. So this plant has grown from a very, very small selection of cuttings that made it that winter. I don't think I had a heating mat at that time. I think that's right. So let's see what we have here. This looks good. Oh, this is going to be easy. So the roots look fantastic. We're also going to give this a haircut. Hopefully I didn't do that too fast. But what I'm going to do is be a little bit aggressive with this. So today, filming this is Friday. I watered this on Tuesday, I think, and it is dry. And by dry, I mean all the way dry. Barely any moisture in here, so it's just drinking this all up. This looks good. I'm not going to go crazy here. Does it look like I'm going crazy? I don't think I'm going crazy. This is growing in a shit ton of perlite. No wonder this plant is so thirsty. Could that potentially be my fault? I mean, I'm the only one who makes mixes around here, but let's not point fingers. Guys, we are a good vibes channel here. We are not a point the fingers vibe here. My gosh. Click right off if that's how you're gonna be today. It's Friday, for crying out loud. It's sunny in Iowa, a lot to celebrate. I have a mix that has a little bit more bark in it than I usually use, because I was under the apparently false assumption that this plant was growing in a lot of bark and I wanted to keep it the same. But this is the Cocoa Choir that I always use, that Thunder Acres, the Cocoa Chips, and number 3 perlite. I can't even think anymore. I'm so ready for the weekend. And then the bark I was talking about. And I'm really happy to see this, because it means it's going to really thrive in this same pot. I love these German clay pots. I don't like growing in plastic pots, and I don't like cover pots. One, I don't like the expense of it, but two, I like the uniformity of either terracotta or these gray pots, or the occasional kind of a whitish salt clay. I just want my eyes to be drawn to the beauty of the plants, not the planter. But I have an old house, wood floors, colors that complement terracotta and clay, so that works for me. Let's get this little honey in here. So as usual, I did there are a little bit more roots here than I was planning on. These are sterilized. I'm just going to do this. I just tried to cut a piece of leca. Don't do that. That can't be good for your nice bonsai scissors. Oh, there are an absolute ton of roots here. So, very healthy plant. And I'm about to give you a pro tip on this, so don't you dare click off. I was just kidding earlier. There we go. That looks good. Let me move this. Let me move you. There we go. So that looks good. And just going to start loading this up. It's a very scientific process here of me just jamming substrate in willy-nilly. There we go. I think some of you have noticed my dog wandering around in my videos. She's busy looking out the window right now. A lot going on in the neighborhood. We've had FedEx, UPS, Amazon. We live in a very, very, very quiet neighborhood at the top of a dead-end street. So that's what constitutes a lot going on for us. And I'll just kind of gently push it in along the sides here, maybe not that gently, because otherwise watering it through, I lost my bench, you'll just create huge cavities in the pot. So back to what I was saying, I watched a couple of videos on this plant when people were just kind of getting them. And then someone who actually, I think the video was only maybe a year old, and they were recommending very bright indirect light, and that is not how I grow mine. I grow it in ambient conditions year-round, so just normal room conditions. I had someone ask me in the last video if I use a humidifier, and I lost that comment. I'm so sorry. I use Levoit, and in my large living room I use 3 of them, which is where all the downstairs plants are during the winter. And there's a root I didn't get buried. Is that an aerial root? Not sure. I'll try to bury it, see what happens. There, I mean, obviously we're not wanting for roots here. For this particular plant, I'm giving it the lowest light conditions. I'm giving any plant, aside from the snake plants I have on my fireplace mantle, in the house. It gets very, very good morning sunlight from an east window in the winter time. In the summer, it does get that same east sunshine, but we have huge trees that block out a lot of it. So it's very bright for a while, but then when the sun starts heading to the other side of the house, it's the lowest side of moderate lighting I think you could probably have and grow a plant well. And this plant is very clearly thriving within those conditions. And I used to grow it in much higher light, and the plant did not look nearly as good to me. It loses this beautiful glaucous color, which I really appreciate. I do not grow this. I don't, well, obviously this one's not on a moss pole. You can see that, but I don't have another one of these grown on a moss pole. I will never grow this on a moss pole. I do not like moss poles. There, I said it. Let the dislikes come in. I do have an Epipremnum, which you may have seen in another video of mine sitting next to me, the Kujang Flame. No point in having a plant like that that doesn't give the really cool fenestrations and that flame look with the variegation. Without a moss pole, it just looks like a pointy golden pothos, which is not the point of that plant. For this one, Sydney plant guy grew a really beautiful one on a moss pole. I mean, there's an opportunity cost to growing things on a moss pole. They grow huge. You know, my philodendron esmeraldens, for instance. To take up that much real estate means there are other plants that I cannot grow because everyone only has so many windows. And I've got a lot of windows during some of the season, but not during the cold seasons. So I lose 16 windows as soon as we have to close the porches, upstairs and downstairs. So that's one reason. I don't like moss poles. Let's not talk about moss poles. There are a lot of reasons I don't love moss poles. Growing up, a moss pole means that you lose this beautiful glaucous color. And for me, that's the whole thing on a Cebu Blue. It's this color. It's absolutely gorgeous. And when the internodal spacing, I would like to hang this somewhere, and I just hadn't gotten around to it. When it gets a little bit longer like this, I know that it's just time to trim and propagate and then give away or sell those. And so I'm going to do that now. I'm going to get a stand to put this on to make it a little bit easier so that you can see it better. I'll be right back. When I trim a plant with my favorite bonsai scissors, that's twice in one video, I don't hold back. I am sure you have heard the advice, never cut back more than 1/3 of a plant at a time. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who would never repot a plant and then cut off any amount of the plant, let alone what I'm about to do. I fly by the seat of my pants. No, I'm just kidding. I've done this a bunch of times and I've never had a problem. It's going to fill out. It's going to send growth hormone back up the vine. So I would never want to trim necessarily a plant, say, down here where the internodal spacing is already getting quite long, because it will branch out from there and start giving you a fuller plant as long as it's getting plenty of light and not hanging below the windowsill like this is right now. Actually, this is kind of draped over my philodendron Brazil, which I featured briefly in the do-it-yourself pest spray video. That's another one that needs some work. Just beautiful. But anyway, so I cut it quite far up. It'll send the growth hormone back up, probably to the base of the plant and wherever you made the cut. And that's the best way to get a fuller plant without doing propagations over and over again, which I may do and I may not do. This vine is looking mighty sparse to here. So there's one. And I'll throw that there. And I kind of just see where I'm at with vines. And like I said, I am heartless. For this plant, what did we learn? I don't like buying from Costa Farms. That's kind of another video in and of itself. But I can talk about it right now. This is a vine that it's just got a bunch of tiny little leaves. I'm going to cut that off. As of a Business Insider expose on Costa Farms, which if you are not in the United States, that's the United States' largest houseplant grower out of Florida. It may be higher than this, but a couple of years ago they were cranking out 1.7 million plants a week. Of those 1.7 million plants, half of them die in distribution. Of the half that make it into someone's home, 70% will die in people who self-identify as beginner plant gardeners. A third will die in people who consider themselves experienced houseplant growers. And they said straight up on camera, not to say it, but that's our business plan. That's how we make money. I'll just leave it there. Anybody who's successful at growing plants in pure cocoa coir, my hat's off to you. And I guess I would have to put myself in the beginner category because I've never been able to keep one alive. So anyway, that's that on Costa Farms. For propagation on this, how do I like to do it? Speaking of things I don't have great success at, I know lots of people do water propagations and they have no trouble getting them from water into the pot and having them be successful. I am at it. Terrible. Absolutely awful. I find that when I do that, I never get good roots growing in the water. every plant I've ever done that for, and it's been, listen, I gave it up, but just struggled mightily, even though I kept the substrate moist and did all of that, just never had any luck. So for this plant, I will be growing it in that number 3 perlite and keeping it wet. I'll fill it all the way up. One other thing I like about that is the surface tension increases with that water, and it really holds a 1-node cutting in there really well. These will have long petioles, so that's not, I mean petiole, long stem, so that's not really an issue. Like some Hoya I've done, like Mathilde, you know, they're just tiny. But as the plant roots, then I can keep the perlite not drenched, but moist, and then less so as we go along. And when I make that transition from perlite to the substrate I'm using right here, I have, one hesitates to say no problems, because who doesn't occasionally have a problem? But the genetics of this plant are wonderful. It grows well, and I'm confident I'll have, how about little to no problem? Is that safer? I realize I'm just having an argument with myself at this point over linguistics. I do live in Iowa City, the city of literature, so I guess that's legitimate. So we have a beautiful Cebu Blue, all fresh, nice haircut. This plant is one of my very, very favorites. So while at the time I really regretted the specific plant I bought, because it was a challenge right from the beginning, and that's not how you want to start a relationship. And if a relationship is hard from the beginning, get out. Just turn and walk away. But it turned out just fine. This is a beautiful, easy plant to grow. I love it so very much. I recommend it to anybody who's looking for a plant that's not a Hoya. Just in case there is someone out there doing that still. Crazy talk. Hey, join me in the next one real soon. Bye-bye.